Hey folks, Joe Valley here. Welcome back to another episode of the Quiet Life Podcast. Today we've got somebody that really is in the offline space, the social media space. She's everywhere. She's got 26 different businesses, crazy, silly, huge, unbelievable social media numbers. We're going to ask her about how she pulled that off. Many of you probably heard of her. Her name's Codie Sanchez. Codie, simple. Welcome to the Quiet Life Podcast.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here, Joe.
You really are like the boss of social media when it comes to buying boring businesses. All right, look, we'll back up. Like I said, there's no script, which means I'm going to fumble, trip and fall and get back up and stutter and not edit a thing, just for the record. All right, so you've got, actually, should I call you Dr. Codie Sanchez? Because you have your doctorate, right?
I do, but it was from being from Brazil, so I always laugh that it was more like cachaça drinking than anything else.
Okay. Right. So it doesn't count then. Well, my father-in-law has a doctorate in inorganic chemistry, which has got to be the most boring, difficult, complicated thing in the world. Very black and white reader. Yours is it in journalism or what is it in?
No, it's actually in international finance. So I was at the time running investments for pensions and sovereign wealth funds. So if you want to read my PhD thesis paper, it's out there somewhere about pension fund usage of commingled products.
Well, being an entrepreneur, I do have trouble sleeping. So when I wake up at 3 a.m, I'll grab a copy of it. Can I download it onto my Kindle?
Yeah, probably not. This is a while ago. I'm old now.
All right. So you've got a background in journalism, did some amazing stuff there, won some awards there. Joined the business world, got your MBA, you have your doctorate, you were in the investment banking world, and then you up and left it all and started your own venture, contrarianthinking.co. They dropped the M there. Wasn't available, I assume, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like e-commerce faux pas number one. I just like the name with all the vowels and without the right slug. Yeah.
I was so excited when I got exitpreneur.com. But then I realized I spelled it wrong. This is me in remedial English, folks. I spelled exitpreneur. Like if it was entrepreneur, I would have spelled it wrong. It's EUR, Joe, not UER. So I ended up with exitpreneur.io. The guy that owns exitpreneur.com wants $250,000 for it. And he's got no business or anything like that. So that's a no. So
it's a no.
You be co and I'll be IO, and we'll both champion our businesses and do well. So
exactly.
Cool. So let's just cut to the chase here in terms of, I know we're going to talk about everything you do, which just blows me away. And you're convincing, you're getting, not convincing, what you do on social media is having people that I know that have left the physical brick and mortar world, jumped online, built an online business. I sold one for several $1 million for a client. I talked to him the other day and he's like, yeah, man, I listen to Codie all the time. She's got me doing a 180. I may go back to the brick and mortar world. It's fascinating. It's fascinating, but that's part of, the evolution of an entrepreneur and maturing and whatnot. But what is it? 2 years now that you've been doing contrarian thinking and you have gone from 0 to 1.5 million followers on social media. How the hell did you do that? Simple.
Yeah, simple. Well, this was always a hard question to answer because I wish it was just like, well, you hear the people say like, well, I just was authentic and I just put myself out there. And then all of a sudden, everybody found me and then I had millions. And like,
why are you talking like a Valley girl?
Because I think it's fake. I just think, I think that is a falsity that a lot of people say when they've gotten a lot of users or when they've gotten a lot of followers. It's actually an amalgamation of sweat, blood, and tears over a few years. And so, for the first year that I did contrarian thinking, and I was working 60 hours a week, I was still in private equity at the time. I was traveling all over the place and it was brutal. But I liked writing, so I kept doing it anyway. And then I think, the growth really happened for us once I started treating my media company as a business as opposed to a blog. So for a long time, I just wrote once a week and I posted about it on social and we got up to like 10 or 20,000 subscribers. And then, when our socials, I don't know, got up to, 20 or 30 or 40,000 or something like that. Just that was like sort of organic, not trying too incredibly hard. And then I started thinking, actually, this is a business like anything else. It's just that I don't have the CapEx and OpEx and hard assets that I do and everything else I do. And so why wouldn't I treat it that way? And so hiring my first, I hired a COO, I think was my first hire, because I didn't understand your world. The online world was so new to me. I had no idea how to do API plugins to all of these different things and everything that everybody knows as an e-commerce entrepreneur sooner than I. And so I think it actually really 10x once I added people to the mix. And to this day, I get people reaching out to me, friends of mine, who have some bigger followings, and they'll say like, "Oh yeah, who's your video guy? Can I use them?" I'm like, "It's cute that you think that we have one video guy that does all of this stuff. It's a team." So, yeah, if you want to actually build a company, the truth of the matter is it's very seldom a one-person show. And there's usually a lot of people in the mix. And if you want to produce video content well, even these ridiculous little snarky 30-second TikToks, it takes a little bit of a team.
Yeah. It's funny because I'm doing a little social media now. I've got 9 followers on TikTok. So I mentioned the other day, I was a micro influencer, but I'm actually, we went to an atom influencer because that's even smaller. And it does take time. It does take time and thinking and planning. So it's impressive that you built the team to do it while it was kind of a side hustle initially for you. But why? Why contrarian thinking? Why talking about buying boring businesses? What led you to that?
Yeah, well, so we started contrarian thinking with a twofold mission. It was think critically and cash flow unconventionally is what we talked about. And so I started it with thinking critically because you all are in the same world I am. I felt like this critical thinking, questioning that is so important to free society, but also to being successful in any way, shape, or form, was under attack a little bit. And so I started writing about that first and foremost. It was more philosophy. And then
was that in relation to owning small businesses, or is it just
no, not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all. Just here's what I see happening in the world, and here's like some things that I think we should think about. And then what I realized is that people don't want to change their opinions. And so like all of us, we think we're right. And we don't really want to question ourselves. We don't want to question other things. So I actually sort of supplanted this Trojan horse in there, which is that everybody wants to talk about money. And money is really intriguing to people. And so I said, okay, we're not just going to talk about ideas. We're going to talk about money as sort of the foundation to freedom. I'm still trying to get to freedom, but I'm starting with money because, if you can't afford your house or to eat, then you don't have much. And so I started talking about, just different ways to cash flow that I wish I knew when I was younger, even being in investments for a long, long time. And what I found is that just some of my philosophies that I didn't realize were weird, such as I really think that most money is made on the private side, not on the public side, aka boring small businesses as opposed to public stocks. And that became one of the cornerstones. And a lot about access and accreditation and why don't most people have access to ownership? Because I think wealth inequality actually happens from lack of ownership access as opposed to just salary versus not. And so it just became sort of a progression. And I think boring businesses, that one really took off because my point with all of this was not to talk to the elites. It was, I want to talk to the everyman who's having a really hard time during COVID-19 and over these last 2 years. And I want to tell them that, hey, there's a lot of ways that you can get ownership in a way that means you didn't have to go to Harvard. And I used boring businesses as a catalyst for that. And so, basically saying, if you're the landscaper, let's think about owning that company. And how can we do that without you being a millionaire? And that's where we got to today. Now there's lots of different businesses and sectors we dive into.
There's some of the most successful people I know. Most of the most successful people I know did not go to an Ivy League school. In fact, some of them didn't go to college at all. One of them, our friend Ramon Van Meer. Folks have talked about him. He was invited to not finish school in the country he's from because he got kicked out of so many. Yet he's a very, very successful entrepreneur. He's in the online space. I wonder if someday he'll go to your world. The online space versus the brick and mortar boring business, vending machines, ice machines, laundromats. To me, there's a big difference, and it's that human connectivity. In the online world, the way to get connectivity is through people in your niche, through masterminds and events and things of that nature. In the offline world, is there that same thing? I guess you're building it with contrarian thinking, but there's also that connection with the community that you're in. Does that matter as much to the type of buyer of a brick and mortar business versus an online business? Or are they still just focused on that cash flow? Because I've seen your videos. There's at a car wash that I take my car through, there's, an ice vending machine. Now there's no human connection there, right? So maybe I'm answering my own answering my own question, but why don't you give a shot at it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I like to, again, I guess the Trojan horse is consistent. How you snare people into caring about commerce and caring about ownership is ways that seem quote unquote easy, in my opinion. Buy an ice machine, stick it somewhere, manage it marginally and cash flow. Okay, interesting. But what happens, and you know this too, when you own a business, is that it's really hard to just stop there. If you own one ice machine, you want to own a few. And then you're like, well, what if we did a website and did like third-party marketing to sell those? And like, also what could happen here? So it's this first step into ownership and this belief that you could be the person in charge and it could be your assets. And then what happens when you think like an owner? Everything changes, right? That's what we tell our employees. Think like an owner. Don't spend when you don't have to. That's what, people at big companies say. Uber used to say, you're an owner, not a renter. And so this idea of mine is if we get more people into the ownership seat, then community actually becomes really important. Then they don't stop at one ice machine. They do more. Then they realize that the vending machine business is maybe too small. So they even sell that on to the next, college graduate that's looking for their first ownership. And then they go to like Tall. I don't know if you know him. He owned like a gumball machine vending route. And then
Tall Moore?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Tall.
Yeah. So, and his progression, he went from hard assets, gumball machines, to basically being like, wait a second, maybe I just fill them, to being like, wait a second, maybe I third party sell them online as the actual machines. And that's where the money's at. And then he's had many iterations since then. And so I think it's a Trojan horse. And I think once you get a little taste of ownership, you can't help but want to go bigger. It's just that most people don't think they're capable of, and that's what we're trying to change.
So how do they start, right? So, the average transaction size at Quiet Light in 2021 was $1.8 million. Too much for most people. And if they want to do it with an SBA loan, they don't have the historical qualifications to be qualified to buy a business with an SBA loan. So the folks that are your audience, they're buying, I'm sure, all size businesses, because I've seen some of the examples that you talk about. Yep. How much do you need to start? Is there a number that somebody's got to have, or secrets or ideas or courses or lists, or what are you doing to help people that are just out of college, they've got debt, or they're in the daily grind and they're trying to buy that first machine that's just going to cash flow a little bit to maybe pay the mortgage?
Yeah. Well, I think this is the best part, in my opinion, about private enterprise and buying small businesses, and also the part that makes it the least sexy. Like, there's always going to be people with more interest in stock trading than what you and I do, because it's just like, I can start with $25 and then I click this button and oh my God, it went up and that feels really good. And now I'm an investor and I make money. That is not what we're talking about here. Whatever I talk about, even if it's simple, it's going to require some work. But that being said, I mean, Ramon's a perfect example. First business he bought was for $500 or $400. I can't remember. And then he staircased his way up. And so how I talk about it is very similar to real estate. Like, first you live with your parents and then you go rent a 1-bedroom. And then maybe you don't want to pay more for the 1-bedroom. So you go and you buy a studio and then you upgrade to a 2-bedroom, condo. And then you go to an actual single family, and then you go to a multifamily, and then you own a building, and then you own industrial. And basically everything looks scary until you take that first little step up. I remember the first time I rented a place, I was like, oh my God, all this paperwork, it's going to be $2,000 a month. This is for millionaires only. And then you realize it's not that scary, and you just keep moving up the ladder from there. So, I mean, obviously not Quiet Light, but there are plenty of brokerage sites where there aren't vetted deals like there are with yours, or deals that have the hand holding that happens a little bit more at Quiet Light. But, they can go to Flippa and buy a business that's doing a couple $100 a month in revenue for $1,000, or maybe go to Deuce and buy a newsletter that's not even cash flowing, but has an audience of people for a couple $100, or buy their first vending machine for a couple $100 and then implement it into a business. And so I don't believe the people who are like, must be nice. Maybe if I had more money, I'd do it. It's like, well, actually, you haven't looked into it enough.
I talked to somebody last week that bought a content site for $2,000 off of Flippa. Yeah. It was 12 months old and had some traffic. And she, for the last 3 years, have just stuck with, producing good quality content over time and monetizing the site. She's earning $35,000 a month now at like 90% margins. So you're right. It doesn't take, $180,000 to get your 10% down on an SBA loan or whatever your number might be. She did it with $2,000. I don't know about Ramon's very first business, but I would talk in the book. I think the first purchase that he and I talked about in the interview was maybe $7,000. Then he sold it for 20. He bought something for 20, sold it for 200 or whatever it might be, and worked his way up to almost an 8-figure exit. And this is a single dad with no formal education, scraping things together, working hard and hustling. And what's so impressive about somebody like that is that, they don't know everything. And they're not afraid to ask dumb questions, or what somebody would be consider a dumb question. I was in an event with him, and we're just talking about personalities here, not necessarily this individual. And someone got up and spoke, and she was the newly appointed CEO of a really impressive company in our world. After the event, we have these gatherings with food and drinks and whatnot. And I saw Ramon walk right up to her and start chatting her up. And they were in deep conversation for a half hour or so. And he was talking to her about things he had no idea about, and he wanted to learn. And she was so open to sharing her knowledge and experience with him. It blew me away, and it taught me a lesson, because I'm very much an introvert, Codie. And so I'm not that guy with a walk up to the speaker and start chatting them up, whereas he wasn't afraid to. More people have to have that courage, I think. But I think you give that to them in terms of the connections and relationships that you build within your group. Because not everybody's going to be you or going to be Ramon. Some folks like me are going to hide in the corner a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and Ramon's not the chattiest. I mean, if anybody was to engage with Ramon, he could be intimidating too, I think. It's a big dude, former fighter, but,
he's not a badass like your husband, though. I hear your husband's a former Navy SEAL. Am I right?
He is, but they fight together. And Ramon Chris would attest that Ramon would mess him up if Chris couldn't get him on the ground and do jiu-jitsu on him.
That's interesting, because Ramon told me that he would take us both down, and I said, yeah, he'd take me down first, and you'd be there behind the dead body. That's so bad.
Oh, maybe they're all just sandbagging us. Nobody wants to tell who the tougher one is.
I'm definitely not.
If I could fight, I would be spouting my mouth nonstop. It would be insufferable. But what I was going to say is, I was doing this interesting little study this week for the blog that comes out on Thursday. Well, anyway, a blog comes out every Thursday, depending on when this comes out. It may be this one or not, but you could search it by then. And it'll be called the Friend Flywheel, something to that effect. But I was looking at, groups, and to your point about, these events and conferences that we go to, about the power of, everybody talks about the 5 people you surround yourself with, blah, 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 the Jim Rohn quote. But I actually think it's much more pervasive than that, because when you look at, like, for instance, the PayPal mafia, right? I thought there was really only like 5 members of that. It's something like there's 13 different members of the PayPal mafia that basically all run some of the biggest Silicon Valley tech companies out there. And then you look at, like, the Federalist Society, which basically was this is a society that wanted to push forward conservative values, and so now have put on the Supreme Court more members of their society than anybody else. There's something like 42 members that are public, not just for the Supreme Court, many different senatorial positions, et cetera. And then you look at, like, I made up this name, but like the OG podcasters like Tim Ferriss, Lewis Howes, James Altucher, Jay Shetty,
Joe Valley. Yeah,
Joe Valley, exactly. Yeah, and those guys have been on each other's podcasts 52, times each. And so I do think there is something to this point. It's not even just about being an introvert. It's why I started Contrarian Cashflow in a way, which is a group where we all sort of come together and talk about different ways to monetize together, because your personal flywheel can spin kind of quickly, as hardworking as you are and as great as your content is or as great as your marketing is. But if you have a bunch of people pushing the wheel at the same time, you hit this velocity, this escape velocity that happens because there are multiple people all sharing their success with you and others. And so even more than introvert, extrovert, I think it's finding a group of humans that are all growing and are willing to grow alongside each other. And that's how you 10X. And I think a lot of the reason Contrarian Thinking did well too is because I try to do that constantly.
And sharing, right? So that goes back to, that human connection and needing that to grow your business and stay passionate about what you do and get over those really tough days, weeks and months and years that we unfortunately have as entrepreneurs. I couldn't have gotten to where I am without that. And when I struggled most in life, in business, it was because I was alone. It was me and my website and my content. I had a writer and I had a developer, and that was it. That was my circle. It was too small. So you do have to have, I think, a bigger circle. When it comes to the brick and mortar space, you think, well, there's people around you. It's more your community in that town. But talk to me about what you're doing with the community at Contrarian Cashflow, because I think it's important for people to understand that it's when you're buying that ice machine or that laundromat or whatever boring business it might be, that you're not just, connected with the people in your neighborhood, in your town, in your community. There's an online community that you've built that you can talk to people all over the country world, I assume.
Yeah. I think you're exactly right. I joined E-commerce Fuel, which is something that we're both a member of years ago, because I had invested in 2 or 3 e-commerce businesses at the time. And I really didn't know my ass from my elbow on e-commerce. And so I was like, well, I'm putting capital to work in this space. I got to go find out where are all the smart people that know all about this so I can just steal their 10,000 hours instead of doing it myself. And so I joined that group. And I've stayed in it this whole time. And I'm kind of a voyeur. I don't engage that much in it. But I've stayed in it because the connections are amazing. When I have an issue with, having maybe I have an issue with our, 3PL provider and we're trying to send stuff out and my provider isn't very good, or maybe I'm getting charged too much for shipping, or what's happening with Nexus, whatever the issue may be. I can go spend a bunch of time trying to figure it out myself, or I could probably drop something in a group like E-commerce Fuel and get my question answered in 30 seconds. And so the same idea for me was we created 2 groups. One group is at Unconventional Acquisitions, and that is for people who are going to spend at least $100,000 buying a business this year. So it's a 1-year mastermind. It's usually for people who are accredited investors who are going to spend at least $100,000. And it's all about just buying businesses. How do you do it? Let's look at deals. Let's be really active together. And that's one group. And that's run by Ryan Snow, who's the CEO of that business. And then there's this other group, Contrarian Cashflow, which is all about distinct ways to create cash flow. You don't have to buy a business. You might just want to invest in real estate and find other people that are going to do that. You might want to figure out, how do I get really good at analyzing funds so that I can do a lot of private deals passively by just investing in other people's funds. And so that's Contrarian Cashflow. And each of them meet 1 time a week to sort of talk about the things that they care about, such as getting cash flow or doing deals. And I created those because I didn't have another one like that. And candidly, I want to buy more businesses. So I wanted that business buying group, and I want more cash flow and assets. So I created a cash flow group because we all bring each other ideas and deals and all that jazz.
So from a human capacity standpoint, how do you do all of that? Do you put people in charge of it like Ryan and somebody else, or do you show up to every single one? Do you plan out what you're going to talk about? Or do you just answer the question? How do you do it all?
Yeah, no, I don't do it all. Ryan is in charge of unconventional acquisitions. I try to show up for all of those phone calls, but he is the one ultimately that is sort of in charge of that business and running all aspects of it. I help with some of the content, and I help with big strategic partnerships, questions, ideas, but I really don't run that business. And then Contrarian Thinking is one of the only businesses that I'm super involved in day to day now. So that's like my main business at the moment. But I have a COO that runs a lot of those calls. And I think I'm on 2 of those 4 calls a month. And then we create a lot of systems and processes to keep removing myself from the day-to-day that I don't think is the most value added. But don't get me wrong. I mean, I think when we were first talking, I owned like 33 businesses that I had a pretty active stance in, and by active, I don't mean like I'm in the business every day, but I'm doing something with it once a week. Now I'm down to 26 businesses, consolidating a few, selling a few others. I think I'll probably get to a place where I want like 10 or 15 that I'm a majority, large shareholder in. And then I'll probably have 30 or 40 that I really don't do much with. And so it's a dance. And when you own, this too, because you have multiple interests, when you own, let's say 10 businesses actively, even if I only do 3 to 4 hours of work a week on each business, we're up to a 40, 50, 60 hour work week pretty quickly. And so just depends on what kind of life you want to have. I like to work, so I keep doing it.
How do you put the right people in charge of those businesses? How do you find the person that's going to operate it well? And how do you incentivize them?
Yeah, I mean, God, I've made so many mistakes in this over the years, and that's probably the only way that I can get it through my thick skull how to learn. But let me tell you a couple of things that I did wrong that I would never do again. I would never do a 50-50 partnership again. Terrible idea. Nobody's in charge because 2 people are in charge. And I really think that it needs to be a benevolent dictatorship in most businesses. I don't have to be in charge, but somebody's got to be in charge. So I don't do 50-50 partnerships.
So of the 26 that you have left, are you majority or minority?
I'm usually majority or large minority.
Okay.
Yeah. But I only have one that has a 50-50 partnership in it. And I'm actually okay over time decreasing my percentage. Like that's what I'll continue to do with these companies. Like, the other person, as the company gets bigger, I can still make as much and decrease my percentage ownership, and they can take over a company overall. In fact, they have one company right now that's really not very big, but it's material to the guy who runs it. And I think I'll probably end up like taking a few more distributions, and I'll transition that business to him. Like I don't need it. It's a great business for him. He's been good to me. I kind of think it's cool to gift businesses like that, especially if you buy some smaller ones. I don't have to sell everything. And so one, no 50-50 partnerships. Another thing is like, you need to take all the pain up front. Wherever I've messed up with founders or people who run the business is basically when I kind of get into it and we like the idea and it's loosey-goosey. Now for all of my businesses, it's like, they're going to take a disc. They're going to take some sort of personality assessment. We're going to have a contract that's really prescriptive with a ton of expectations set within it. I'm going to tell them ad nauseum all the things that I will not be doing for this business and be very specific on the very few things I will do for the business. I'm going to under promise, over deliver, hopefully, but maybe I'm going to under promise and only deliver that. And so I think if you don't set expectations, if your contracts aren't right, if you don't take the pain up front of really getting to know the operator, this could be a nightmare for people. But if you do those things, then it can feel like a holdco that you cash flow off of.
And how are you finding the people?
Oh, how do I find them?
Yeah. What's the lessons you've learned there and where do you go? I mean, are you just posting something on LinkedIn, friends, family, military folks, because you're connected there? How do you find the right people to partner with or to eventually, be partners with in your business?
I think I like to collect humans over time. So most of the times when I meet you, I mean, you're a perfect example. I'm like, Joe, I like you. I like what you've built. What can we do together? You got this thing over there. I think I want a part of that. Like, you want to do something together? Like I kind of know. And then we'll get into the nitty gritty afterwards. But I'm almost always with people that I think are competent, trying to figure out some way we could do something together. So the way that I find them is I have a big reach. I go to like 10 to 30 events a year that I think are interesting. And I bet you go to as many too. You don't realize it because you don't always think of them that way, but I try to track that. And almost every time for like Contrarian, we had something called Contrarian Uncon, a conference here in Austin. And there are like 3 people that I think are perfect operators, one of which I'm talking to about running a business for us as we speak. And so each time I'm kind of collecting them as we go. I think where you get into trouble and where it's hard is you're like, there's an opportunity. I need somebody. And I'm just like, and I don't have anybody. And now I got to go scour the world for this somebody. That I've never been very good at.
Yeah, I think that's been Shaquille's approach over the years, and it's worked out fairly well for him. Shaquille Proslow, who I think he's down there in Austin as well.
Yeah.
And he's done well, but it's a challenge, right? a lot of people would buy these and then try to find the right person to put in place for it, as opposed to building a network of entrepreneurs or people that want to be in this world a little bit more. And as you're buying that business, you've already got some people in mind to operate it. And maybe you're talking to them about it before you make the purchase. And sometimes, honestly, well, no, this wouldn't work. I was going to say sometimes owners want to stay on, but mostly they want to get out of the daily grind when they sell. So buying it or selling it and continuing to operating it in the same way is not, necessarily what they want to do. So
no, that hasn't ever worked out that well for me. I have one business where we bought it and the guy still runs it. And it's an okay business, but I don't ever see him taking it to a 10X. And I don't really think he has like that capability either, because if, I like to buy businesses at pretty decent valuations. And at those valuations, like really great operators are probably not going to exit to me at 2 to 6X, their profit, below $5 million in revenue. It's, if they're crushing it and they're going to keep growing it and whatever, they're going to tell me to pound sand because in 2 years it'll be worth a lot more. And so, I usually have to put new people in.
On that note, Codie, from an investor standpoint, how do you look at, you've got a higher multiple, but you've got pretty tremendous growth, right? 25, 30, 40, 50, 80% year over year growth for the last 2 or 3 years. How much does that annual growth work into your investment calculations?
For me, almost zero, because I don't buy those types of businesses. I really, unless it's a plug-in to, another business I have. So let's say now I'm focused a lot on contrarian thinking. We're growing like crazy, a couple 100% each year. And let's say that then I want to go buy another content business to plug in. I might say, okay, yeah, I'll pay a premium for this because the value add that I'm going to do for it is actually going to be pretty good. We'll do a roll up and this will actually have like a creative return on the upside. That could make sense. But most of the time, like if I see a car wash that's done like 80% growth, year over year, and they want to project out future growth to the multiples, like that's just not going to work for me. Because a lot of the businesses that I'm buying that are boring businesses are like bonds. I buy them for like this cash flow that they're going to do. And if they end up doing more, that's awesome. But I don't project that into our model. And the only time I do project it is when I have a killer operator that I'm like, take this bond and turn it into equity, right? Sure. Make this a rocket ship. But a lot of times that's not the goal. It's like this business has existed for 30 years and it's done right about this amount. It's grown 5 to 10% per year. And let's keep doing that, except do it a little bit smarter. Yeah. And that's it.
It's just such a funny thing. A business been around for 30 years. We haven't sold, I think the oldest one we've ever sold is 17. And that's like a dinosaur in this world that we're in, but you're in a different world a little bit anyways. It's fascinating. Yep. Let's just talk about Codie Sanchez, the human. Seriously, this has been a crazy 2.5 year ride for you with what you're doing. And I know how exhausting it can be. And I want to know how you're handling it all. How do you make sure you're getting your you time, your mental health time, your downtime, your husband time, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Honestly, and you probably know, when I was in finance, we just worked so much. I mean, back when I was at Goldman Sachs and, I was doing my MBA for a period and working, I was traveling nonstop to Latin America. I don't even know it was like 80-hour weeks. And so I sort of laugh now when I look at my schedule, because I'm like, I would fly in, Joe, on Sunday night. I'd take a red eye that would leave at like 9:10 or something like that from DFW in Dallas and get into Chile in the morning at like 7 or 8 in the morning, something like that. It was 13 hours. I don't know, do the math, something in there. And then I would go to meetings at 10, dinners until probably 11 that day. I'd have back-to-back meetings in Chile. And then I get up the next day and do the same thing, the next day, the same thing, the same thing. And then I would take the red eye home Friday night. I'd have Saturday day, Sunday day, and then I'd fly out again Sunday night. So like,
this is easy online, what you're doing now compared to that.
Yeah, like playing online. Maybe that's like the thing with e-commerce and online businesses is I'm like, oh my God, like this is nothing compared to having to go and travel around the world and do finance. But one difference I think is the content business is harder to outsource. So at least for me, so far. I could tell you how to create an asset management firm and a finance business, and I could plug people in like crazy, and I knew the model, and it was just like, go. And now that I'm starting this brand new industry in media, what makes a good copywriter versus a not good copywriter? What makes a good videographer versus not? In finance, it's very easy. It's like numbers here, numbers there, one's better than the other. And this is a whole different thing. And so I need to get better at taking myself out of more parts of this business. I'm not there yet, but I'm still liking it all. So it's okay for now.
Yeah, it's hard. It takes time. And I agree with you 100% on the content side. It's hard to find people to write about your expertise, right? And that's where you started, with your own expertise. It's the hardest challenge we've had at Quiet Light, is finding people that can, write about what we do every day. I wrote a freaking book about it. I say, here, read the book. That'll tell you. They still can't write about it. So it's happening though. We've got some talented people, and it's just like you say, connecting with, the people over time, the people that are doing our writing now are people we've met along the way. They're not people that we just put an ad out for. So you're absolutely right about that. Listen, Codie, I think I could probably talk to you for another couple of hours and the audience wouldn't drop off much, but I do want to be respectful of your time. So any last thoughts for people that are out there thinking about jumping into the entrepreneurial world? Any little tidbits that you want to share with them and advice that you want to give?
Well, actually, let's quote one of your guys who wrote a book that I tell a lot of people to read, which is that I think you should buy, then build. That's your guy Walker's book. I really think, I'm torn on this, right? Because sometimes some of our videos make it all sound too easy. And it's not no work. It's definitely work. But I think most people waste their time creating things that people don't want, playing it too small, not going as big as they should. And there is a lot of risk in that too, as opposed to risk of going bigger or to actually buying a company. And I would much rather start with revenue and profits on day one than work for a year paying with the hope that I eventually get money back, which is what you do when you do a startup. So unless you have a giantly cool idea that you think has to exist in the world, like for the love of all that's holy, stop doing little startups that are just for profit. That's a dumb way to do it. Buy a business instead. And so anyway, I think I'm on the right podcast for this audience, but that's my take.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. There's less risk if you're buying. Some people are really good at that startup phase, right? And they get the energy and drive from it. And then when it gets to a certain point, they get bored and have to do other things. And that's when that acquisition entrepreneur comes into play. Your people that are buying these businesses, whether it's an online or offline, right? I think there's no clear distinction, no drawn line between the two. Because people like Brian Lejeune, who was the one I was talking about earlier, I sold the business for him and his wife, Janine. Actually, they're technically not married. I always have to make that clarification. They were pharmacists in the very, very well-educated people. And then, suntan salons and juice places and things of this nature, and then jumped into the online world, sold that, still owns some, bought some more. Now in the Airbnb, they were even renting out their Jeep in Florida by their Airbnb. I forget what the name of that company is, Toro, I think.
Toro. Yeah.
But now they're listening to you on a regular basis going, man, I got to get into this vending machine stuff. I got to get into this ice machine stuff. Tell Codie I said hi, that kind of stuff. So
I love it.
Those lines are definitely crossing, and it's exciting. In fact, you're going to be speaking, and I don't know if this will air by the time. It won't actually. By the time we go to ECF, you're going to be speaking at ECF this month, right? End of the month?
Yeah, it'll be cool. Yes, we'll be speaking there. And you know what? Because you and I talked about this earlier. The other thing I think I want to tell people is the flip side of that coin. I can't tell you how many people had businesses of varying sizes that they could have sold and didn't. So I think your book's really important for that. Anybody, like a wedding videographer, you think you have a job, but you actually also have a business. And so all of this is sellable in this world that we live in. And I think it's crazy that people build a quote unquote, house, which would be their business, own the house, own the land. And then are just like, I'm going to walk away. We're just going to leave it. And that's really what you do when you don't sell your business. And so, and it's a great exercise. You know this, like you'll learn so much about, what do you mean? I could have milestones, or they want to have an asset sale, not a, they want to do not a stock sale. And you're just going to learn about this stuff that is the real meat of money. And you can do it through M&A.
Yeah. The answer is tens of thousands of people who didn't realize they had a sellable asset and walked away from it. And unfortunately, that asset that they own and operate could likely be their most valuable asset, but they have no idea what it's worth and what the value is. And they get emotionally tired, worn out, frustrated, and focus on other things. And I know that from experience because I did it with one of my biggest companies. I got tired of it, Codie, and I eventually just walked away because it's JVI Media, Joe Valley Incorporated, JVI Media. It's me. I got to move on. I could have sold that in its heyday without question. It would have been one of my biggest exits, but I didn't know any better. So I hear you. You're dead on. Codie, how do the audience find you? How do they reach out to you? How do they connect with you? Learn more about what you do?
I think the best thing is probably contrarianthinking.co. That's our website. You have a blog that comes out every single week. It's about a bunch of stuff like this. And then I'm Codie, Codie Sanchez on all the socials. I'm pretty active on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. So you can pick your poison. I promise you no dancing on TikTok. That I can promise you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I was just talking to somebody last week about TikTok, and it was a podcast on TikTok. And I was confused because another podcaster who is a female business owner is dancing. And sometimes she's got a halter top on and I'm confused. I'm like, why is she doing that? He explained it to me. Actually kind of made sense, but I like the fact that you're not dancing. Thank you for that.
Yeah. I got to draw a line somewhere. I mean, there's lots of people that are into it. So no shame on their game for sure. I'm just going to save everybody from watching that from me.
There you go. All right. Well, I look forward to seeing you at the end of the month at ECF and connecting again in the future, Codie. Thanks for coming on the Quiet Life podcast.
Sounds like a plan, man.